So now that the ranking member is here, we can, thank you, Mr. Davis. We're 55 minutes late because of votes. Apologies to everyone, but not much we could do about it. We will, the House Administration Committee will now come to order. And we have really two things to do today. There's a business meeting and then a hearing. The Committee on, we need to consider Committee Resolution 116-08. And this has to do with the interim regulations governing House paid internships. The authority to provide paid internships was provided last Congress with the enactment in September of Public Law 115-244, the Energy, Water, Ledge Branch, and Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Appropriations Act. Interns under the House paid internship program will be subject to the same House rules and regulations as other paid and unpaid interns, and will be accountable to the member office where they work. These interns will be required to participate in educational programming, such as the intern lecture series, as are all other interns. The Chief Administrative Officer will administer these funds and report regularly to the Committee on the program's use. This measure authorized health offices to provide payment to interns a stipend, limiting these payments to $20,000 per office. The overall funding for this program is $8.8 million. Now, in providing these funds, the Appropriations Committee made an important first step in breaking down the economic barrier to those seeking entry-level work on Capitol Hill. By expanding this opportunity for public service, it is my hope that qualified candidates for these internships will now have opportunities they did not have before. This committee was tasked with promulgating the regulations within which to operate this new program. I would stress that the regulations provided for in this resolution are interim regulations provided to get this program up and running. I've intentionally structured these regulations as interim because it is my intention to continually assess the effectiveness of this program and make improvements and changes after hearing feedback from both member offices and program participants. And we hope to work with our colleagues who are in the Ledge Branch Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee to provide additional funding for this program for the fiscal year ahead, and to revisit these interim regulations to build a more robust paid internship program for the House of Representatives. I'm pleased that we've worked across the aisle in developing these regulations, and I appreciate the contributions of the ranking member and his staff to make this an even better product, and I would now recognize the ranking member for any statement he may have before we consider this resolution.
Well, Madam Chairperson, I first want to thank you and your staff. And even though it pains me, that includes Jamie Fleet, your staff director. Thank you, Jamie. You did a great job, buddy. And I really want to actually acknowledge you and your entire team for working with my team on making sure that these paid intern regulations were moving forward. You accepted nearly all of our recommendations, so thank you for that. The one recommendation I hope this committee can revisit in the future, because these are interim regulations, is the requirement that the interns being paid out of the accounts have to work in Washington, D.C. I think it's important for us as a committee to discuss in the future how we can allow members to best decide where to spend the funds for an internship that may be better for them in their district. So that's something we can work on together in the future, but I am happy to support these interim regulations. And again, thank you, Madam Chairperson, for the bipartisanship, and thank you for your work in making today happen.
Thank you. And the ranking member yields back. Does any other member, Ms. Davis from California, wishes to be heard, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm proud to support this committee resolution, and I recognize that it's really only a start, giving offices the resources to pay their interns, and I certainly applaud that. Hopefully, this intern payment program will be successful, and we can expand it so all interns can be paid in the near future. I hope it will eventually cover district interns in addition to DC interns, and I'm delighted that Mr. Davis and I agree on that. And we agree on a lot of things, but particularly on this. And so that's a good thing. I know that Washington, of course, is a very expensive place to live, but many districts are also expensive, San Diego certainly being one of those. In any city, no matter the cost of living, working for free isn't cheap. You need an income to get by in this world. On the Education Committee, on which I also serve, I'm a proponent of apprenticeships. And internships really should be the apprenticeships for the political field. This fund should be more generous if we pay interns fairly for their work. It's only $20,000, yet we can pay interns up to $1,800 a month. If you do the math, it barely covers one full-time intern. And the reality is that most offices have several interns at a time. Right now, our office has 6 at any given time between our 2 offices. So I hope the entire paid intern program will be expanded to reflect the reality of how many interns offices actually need and the actual cost of living both in DC and around the country. I would also advocate that House committees get funds to pay their interns, since those internships provide valuable experience as well. And we all know that House committees have plenty of interns working hard for them. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm delighted to yield back, and I certainly hope that we can move forward on this legislation.
Gentlelady yields back. Does anyone else wish to be heard on the resolution? And I will close by noting that these internships are not jobs, they're educational opportunities, and we are continuing to require that individuals in the internship program participate in the educational opportunities, but we do recognize that without a stipend, some students whose families are not well-to-do might not have the opportunity for the educational experience, and this is meant to remedy with that. With that,
Madam Chair.
the gentleman from Maryland.
But I just wanted to add my voice to the chorus of praise for what we're doing in the House of Representatives right now. On a bipartisan basis. The internship for young people who are interested in government and public policy is a well-known thrill, and it's a great asset to them in the development of their educations and careers. And a lot of young people are prevented from doing it just because they don't have anywhere to live locally. They're not able to support themselves during the summer. And so this is a great step forward in making sure that the summer internship is open to everyone. I understand, I seem to recall even, that there was something vaguely similar, an LBJ internship several decades ago, but maybe that was just one per office, and this also gives an excellent flexibility to the members to decide how to divide their money up in order to maximize the effect of it. So I salute the sponsor for doing this, and I want to just congratulate everybody on a bipartisan basis who's been involved, and I yield back.
And the gentleman yields back. I would just note just a bit of personal experience. When I showed up here in May of 1970, right after I graduated from college, I walked into an internship, and my predecessor in office, Congressman Don Edwards. Now, my dad was a truck driver. There was no way they could have donated money for me to stay or for rent or anything like that. But Don Edwards had a small stipend so that the interns, even people whose parents were not wealthy, would have an opportunity to participate in the program. And it made all the difference for me, and now I am here as his successor. So on the resolution, all those who are in favor will say aye. Aye. All those who are opposed will say no. And in the opinion of the chair, the resolution is approved. Without objection, the staff is authorized to make any technical and conforming changes, and there being no further business, the business part of this meeting will be adjourned. Now we will begin the committee funding hearing, and I would like to thank the members, our witnesses, and those in the audience for being here. Every Congress, the House is required to adopt a committee expense resolution which provides funding for all the committees of the House. Each committee is required to introduce a committee expense resolution and prepare a budget submission. We have received and are reviewing those budget submissions, and I would ask unanimous consent for the letters regarding committee budgets from the chairs and ranking members of the committees to be entered into the record. Without objection, that will happen. It's my intention to mark up an omnibus expense resolution on Tuesday, March 26th, and for the House to consider it on Thursday, March 28th. Now, understanding the quick pace of this schedule, and after conferring with the ranking member, he and I decided that to most expeditiously consider these requests, that we would forego the usual testimony of our committee chairs and ranking members only if there was bipartisan support from the chair and ranking member of each committee, reserving the right, of course, for either myself or the ranking member to pull something off the consent agenda, which we have decided not to do at this point. Obviously, this has always been a collaborative process and a bipartisan process, and I wish to thank the ranking member for his cooperation and assistance in enabling the committee to begin this process in an expedited fashion. We certainly reserve the right to change this process next year if it doesn't work out well, but certainly in the past we've had chairman and ranking members sitting around all day long for something where there was agreement and it seemed not necessarily to be a productive use of time. So with that, I would recognize Mr. Davis for his opening statement, and then we will get to the one committee that has asked to be heard today.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson Lofgren, and I readily agreed to your suggestion that if there's bipartisan consensus between the chairs and the ranking members of the committees regarding their funding requests, they ought to be able to submit the paperwork, and we'll do a thorough review of their requests and ensure that we move those requests forward. And I think each chairperson and ranking member understands that even though they may have an agreement on their budget requests, it may not be what this committee ends up agreeing to. That being said, we see that there's disagreement on one committee. It's going to be, I'm looking forward to hearing from Chairman Cummings and Ranking Member Jordan on that disagreement. But, you know, even though not all the chairs and the ranking members are coming to testify before us today, we will do that thorough review. And I request, Madam Chairperson, in order to conduct proper oversight of the committee funding, I'd like to request that we keep the section requiring a review of the use of funds in the first session in this Congress's funding resolution. I think it gives our committee the option of requesting that the chair and ranking member of each committee provide a review of the use of the funds in the first session and an update on any changes to anticipated expenditures for the second session.
If the gentleman may yield,
Yes.
It was not my intention to change the processes, simply to waive them in this case because it's inconsistent. Now, we may decide that there's not a reason to bring people in, but because this has been bipartisan, I expect it to continue to be so. We're not eliminating those tools.
Well, I appreciate that, and that's the only request I had. I appreciate your consideration and most importantly, your cooperation that you've already shown us. So I'll yield back the balance of my time, and we can get to Chairman Cummings and Ranking Member Jordan.
Well, we'll invite the chairman and ranking member of the Oversight Committee to take their seats and to address us. Ordinarily, we operate under the 5-minute rule, so we will do so at this time. And if you are ready, Mr. Cummings, we'll be happy to recognize you for 5 minutes, and then the ranking member, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. To Chairwoman Laughlin and Ranking Member Davis, and to members of the committee, I thank you very much for this opportunity to testify before you today regarding our budget submission for the Committee on Oversight and Reform for the 116th Congress. As you know, we submitted our formal request on Friday with the supporting documentation. I will not recount everything in that submission, but I would like to briefly make 4 key points. First, over the past 10 years, the Oversight Committee's budget has been reduced dramatically from about $22.3 million in the 111th Congress to $18.3 million in the last Congress. For the committee's review, I've submitted a summary of our budget reductions over the last decade. I understand that there were many reasons for that, but the bottom line is that we have not been able to fill out our allocated staffing slots in many years. At our existing funding level, we will have 25 vacancies for existing staff slots that we are not able to fill. 15 of these vacancies are on the majority staff, and 10 are on the minority staff. Second, we understand the financial challenges that you are facing, and we have tried to respect those limitations. As a result, we are not asking for full funding to restore us to levels we were 10 years ago. The Oversight Committee would need a funding increase of approximately 22.3% to restore funding to the level that we were 10 years ago. Instead, we are requesting only a modest 4% increase this year, followed by a 10% increase next year. From my perspective, this would be a down payment towards restoring full committee funding in future years to fill the essential oversight staff positions that have long been vacant. Third, I understand that other committees may be seeking much bigger increases, some even as large as 20%. However, I'd like to point out that in the last Congress, the Oversight Committee received one of the most minuscule increases compared to other committees. Our committee's 1.11% increase was the second smallest among 20 House committees. Our committee increases range from 2%. Other committee increases range from 2% to more than 30%. Finally, our work in particular is designed to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, and it often results in direct savings to the taxpayers. Eliminating duplication and inefficiency can translate into real savings in both the short term and long term. That is one of the special benefits of the good work that our committee does. Let me close with this. As the primary investigative committee of the House of Representatives, the Oversight Committee has one of the broadest jurisdictions of any committee in the House. We're charged with conducting robust and responsible oversight of the entire federal government and beyond. We are not only conducting robust and responsible oversight of the executive branch in this administration, we are also overseeing ONDCP's efforts to combat the opioid crisis that claimed more than 70,000 lives last year. We are conducting hearings on the upcoming census next year, which is facing extremely significant challenges. We're working on a bipartisan basis to address the financial troubles at the Postal Service. And as I close, and we are investigating the skyrocketing prices of prescription drugs. Beginning the process of restoring the Oversight Committee's funding will send a strong signal to the House of Representatives that the House of Representatives is taking seriously its oversight responsibilities under the Constitution. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Mr. Jordan, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairperson Lofgren, Ranking Member Davis, thank you for having us today. I'm pleased to be here with the chairman. I have the utmost respect for Chairman Cummings, but I respectfully disagree with the proposed budget. This is real simple. This is about setting an example. I mean, everyone knows the facts. We're going to run a $900 billion deficit this year. $1 trillion deficits for the next decade is the projection. In addition, CBO projects that federal outlays will amass $4.4 trillion in fiscal year 2019 and up to $7 trillion in fiscal year 2029. Simply put, our federal government has grown out of control. In this environment, seems to me we should be giving money back to the American taxpayers, certainly not increasing budgets for Congress. As I said, this is real simple. It's about setting an example. Understand this too. The last year of the Obama administration, just 4 years ago, the budget for the Oversight Committee was more than it is now. And Chairman Cummings still seeks an increase. I understand where it was 10 years ago, but just 4 years ago, we were doing, the committee was functioning on a level that is higher than what we're currently at, and the chairman is asking for an increase. I respectfully submit for your consideration that the funding level for the Committee on Oversight and Reform should remain unchanged from the previous Congress. And I want to thank you again, Chairperson Lofgren and Ranking Member Davis. Obviously, we're happy to answer any questions.
The gentleman yields back. Now is the time where members can ask questions of either the chair or the ranking member. I'll turn first to Mr. Davis for any questions he may have.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and thank you, Chairman Cummings and Ranking Member Jordan. Ranking Member Jordan, I appreciate your concerns. We should have a concern about how our allocations are moving forward and how we as Republicans and Democrats work together to actually lower the cost of taxpayers, everything we do within this legislative branch. Can you elaborate a little more, Mr. Jordan, on some of the concerns maybe with the increased dollars within your committee operations or any other issues that we as a committee might need to know about before we make this decision?
Yeah, maybe I'll just look at the numbers here. The current budget right now is $200,000 than it was in the 114th Congress, and the chairman is seeking a $1.7 million increase. I come back to the basics. I think there are all kinds of families across this country who've had to live on the same thing they did in previous years. I don't know why the government can't, as I said before, lead by example and function on where we were in previous Congresses.
Mr. Jordan, you and Chairman Cummings have agreed on the 2/3, 1/3 ratio for funds that you already have established and any future funds too, right?
That is correct.
That's correct. Thank you, Chairman. I'll go to you, Chairman Cummings. A $1.7 million increase in funding. I noticed through some of your requests, obviously, you look at some of the investigatory issues that you may be facing as a committee in the future. What do you think is going to be the most costly portion of your oversight agenda?
I'm not sure, but I can tell you that when you've got slots where you've got 15 people, positions you can't fill, that means that my people are working a night and day and night. It is not unusual, by the way, for my staff to be working at 4 o'clock in the morning, literally. And it's quite a bit. We get a lot of getting documents in, have to oversee them. So basically what we want to do is make sure that people have decent working conditions and are able to do their jobs in an efficient and effective manner. There are two words that I govern my staff by, and that's efficiency and effectiveness. And I'm going to tell you, if you or any of us were working at 4 o'clock in the morning and then have to come back at 9, you're not going to be so effective. So we, again, we've had very minuscule increases. Other committees have gotten far more than what we've gotten, and I just think that when you think about the breadth of our jurisdiction, I think it's only appropriate. Another thing that a lot of people don't consider is that we are now in a social media situation where 10 years ago the social media was not near what it is now. Now somebody can just sit at a computer, next thing you know, they're shooting all kinds of letters and information to us. And so we just want to be in a position to appropriately deal with that, again, in an effective, efficient manner without working our employees to death.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I certainly understand the impact social media has made on on how we do our jobs here in Congress. Mr. Jordan, at what level would you think that the committee should be funded at?
Keep it where it's at. I mean, Twitter shouldn't drive a $1.7 million decision. I mean, come on. Look, we got 25 people work for the Republican side. We're committed to working hard, just like the chairman talked about. Everyone, I think, wants their staff to work hard, and they all do. But we have to, as I said, over and over again, maybe for once Congress should step up and set a little bit of an example and say, at a time when we're running trillion-dollar deficits for the next decade, that's the projection, at a time when we got a $22 trillion debt, I don't think it's good enough to tell the taxpayers, oh, people are on Twitter, we need a $1.7 million increase. I just don't think that works.
Mr. Jordan, Mr. Cummings?
I got to say something about that.
Okay.
I will not leave here with somebody talking about Twitter.
You brought up
No, let me finish.
I didn't.
May I finish?
Yes.
I have the floor. Let me be abundantly clear. We, according to many, we have one of the best staffs on Capitol Hill. I plan to keep it. And I care about his staff, and I care about mine. Let me finish. I have the floor. On that committee, I have stood up for his staff and mine, because these are public employees. A lot of times they are criticized over and over again, but they deserve to have a decent working conditions. And all I'm just, I hate it that it has been put to Twitter. Strike all of that. All I'm saying, decent working conditions. And yeah, we want to set an example, but we're also going to set an example for excellence.
The gentleman's time has expired, but I'm sure we'll have an opportunity because other members may want to weigh in. So the gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, thank you so much. Chairman Cummings, first of all, I want to thank you for coming today, and I want to thank you for the extraordinary work you're doing as chairman of the Oversight Committee. You are relentless, you are focused, and you are fair-minded every step along the way in trying to ferret out corruption, waste, fraud, abuse, and lawlessness in every branch of government. And you are a gentleman, because I watch you. You are a gentleman, and you treat people with fairness and with kindness. Secondly, I'm sorry, I know that your knee still hurts you, and I'm sorry you had to come all the way down here for this hearing, but fair enough. I like the new process that the chair is instituting here, and I think that we can proceed on a bipartisan basis. Now, let me say this. The Oversight Committee budget was reduced from $22.3 million in the 111th Congress to $18.3 million in the last Congress. You would need a 22% increase in order to just get back to the level that the Oversight had a decade ago, but you're not asking for a 22% increase. You're asking for a 4% increase, as I understand it. Now, the job of the Oversight Committee is to go after waste, fraud, abuse, duplication, corruption, inefficiency, ineffectiveness in the federal government. If there's any committee you think we should be investing more in, certainly it's the committee that's trying to save the taxpayers. I'm not talking about $1 million or $2 million here. We're talking about billions of dollars. We've had hearings where we've discovered that there's $150 billion unaccounted for in the Department of Defense, right? Waste, fraud, and abuse. Say something about what you see as the principal purpose of your committee.
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. We're looking not only at waste, fraud, and abuse, but we're also looking at the way, and this is something that we have not talked about a lot here, but the way employees are treated. As you know, we've had some real problems with regard to sexual harassment in various agencies. But the waste, fraud, and abuse is significant because we are saving a lot of money. A lot of people, we have 3 people, Congressman, on my staff. I call them the drug team. And what they deal with is the high price of prescription drugs. If you follow headlines, we've already seen the impact that they have had. The 3 people have had on stock prices with regard to drugs. I mean, it's been astronomical, saving the taxpayers money. And by the way, it's not just government. We're looking at the opioid crisis. We're looking at a whole lot of things that might not normally get the attention. Right now, for example, and this is something that goes along with what you just said, we've got Wilbur Ross coming in tomorrow, Madam Chair. Wilbur Ross coming in tomorrow, and he's going to talk about the citizenship question. That affects everybody, all of us, with regard to the census. He's already been told. He came to us and said, he told the Congress that the citizenship question, I'm going to be very brief, came from DOJ. Come to find out, it came from Steve Bannon. And so that one question will affect redistricting, distribution of funds, reapportionment, a whole lot of things. So we've got, again, I believe our savings, the savings will, whatever you all give us, we will give it back in savings by rooting out fraud, waste, and abuse.
Mr. Chairman, let me ask you this. But I understand, I think every other committee is getting some, at least modest increase, except for the Budget Committee, which didn't request it. But every other single committee, this is the only one where there's been an objection. The Oversight Committee, which is looking into corruption throughout government and in the corporate sector, the private sector, as you say, do you find some irony in the fact that we voted, or at least some people voted, for a $1.5 trillion tax cut to the wealthiest interests in the country, and then come back and complain about a $1.5 million increase to go after the corruption that exists in government?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, let me just say finally, again, as a Marylander, I'm very proud, especially of the work you're doing for the whole United States of America. Thank you for your testimony.
Gentleman yields back. Would the gentleman from North Carolina like to be recognized?
Yes, thank you.
And you're
Madam
recognized for
Chair.
5 minutes.
Thank you. I just have one question, shouldn't be that long. I've served on the House Oversight for 4 years and echo some of the comments, the compliments by Mr. Rankin as far as the character integrity that I've seen you display, and I don't mind going on the record sharing that. The question as far as the $1.7 million, the additional money, Mr. Cummings, you mentioned, or Chairman Cummings, you mentioned working conditions. So I wrote down 2 or 3 things here. Where is the bulk of that money? I know we don't have an exact budget. Is it to working conditions? Is it to additional employees? Do you feel like that more investigations are part of the projection, or is it a combination of all of the above?
A combination of all of the above. There are probably some things that we want to look at. There's so much to look at. As I've said many times, we have so many things that are coming towards us. We're at a time when a lot of people, career employees, are very dissatisfied. And so you got a lot of people who are concerned about what's going on in government. We could not even get to probably, we'll at best get to about a third of the things that we need to get to.
Okay. All right. And since we're passing out accolades, I would be remiss if I didn't say the Jim Jordan that I know is consistent. His style may not always be for everybody, but he is somebody who is a true seeker, and it's been a privilege to work with him as well. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
A gentleman yields back. Gentleman from North Carolina, do you wish to be heard for 5 minutes?
I do, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for recognizing me. Let me just say in the outset that I find it so interesting that Mr. Jordan has come forward today to lecture us on fiscal discipline. I want to read to you an article that appeared in yesterday's roll call. I just happened to have it in my pocket for another reason today, but I want to just put it in the record today. It said the following: for the fiscal year that begins October 1st, President Trump would increase defense spending by 5% to $750 billion, despite a spending cap imposed by a deficit reduction law. To get around the cap, the budget calls for funneling $165 billion into a war-related account. At the same time, President Trump would cut non-defense programs by 5% from current levels and cancel previously approved projects to total about $55 billion in reductions. Total discretionary spending, combining defense and non-defense, would be trimmed by 1.8% in the coming year to $1.3 trillion. The rest of the budget is made up of entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare. If all of the administration's recommendations were carried out, deficits would continue to decline. But the plan also assumes a continuation of robust economic growth. Trump would also renew his fight over a border wall and up the ante by requesting $8.6 billion in fiscal 2020, a 50% increase from the 5.7. The new larger request includes $5 billion for Homeland Security, combined with $3.6 billion for military construction. The VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs, will get a 7% increase, and the Department of Homeland Security will get a 7.4% increase. So that is the President's budget. And for Mr. Jordan to come today to say that the hard-working committee that is charged with the responsibility of government oversight cannot have the resources to evaluate and to monitor the executive branch, I believe is disingenuous. And it's also instructive that this is the only committee out of, how many committees do we have, 20, 21 standing committees in the House? This is the only committee where the ranking Republican and the chairman of the committee cannot reach a consensus on budgeting for that committee. I would vote to give the committee the 4% increase that Mr. Cummings has requested, and I would ask that perhaps some of the comments that we've heard today be also addressed to the executive branch and to the President himself. Thank you. I don't have any questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Councilman
Cummings?
Butterfield, just
Cummings.
1 second.
Yes.
I want you to know that in all my years as ranking member, I have always, with ISA, Chaffetz, and Gowdy, come in with them, and we jointly asked for, we jointly did our budget request of this committee.
I just don't want your committee to be a guinea pig on fiscal discipline.
I understand.
Fiscal
But
discipline
But I want you
belongs.
to understand,
Yes.
we've done that in the past.
Yes.
We've been able to come together in the past and present.
Well, if I'm given the opportunity, I'm going to vote to give you the resources.
Thank you.
And with a 1/3 match to the Republicans as well.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Would the gentleman from Georgia like to be heard?
Yes, Madam Chair.
And he's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate both Chairman Cummings and Ranking Member Jordan coming in today. Look, you guys have disagreements, and that's good. It's fine. And I appreciate, Mr. Cummings, your testimony in here. I appreciate Mr. Jordan's. I think if we had a few more like Mr. Jordan, maybe we would find a way out of this $22 trillion debt. But even as I go back home sometimes and I talk about people are concerned about the debt, and they're very concerned about the debt until it comes to cutting the one thing they're interested in. And until we're willing to do that, we're never going to get out of debt. So I appreciate Mr. Jordan coming in and standing up and taking this stance. I actually have some questions. I actually do read this stuff that people send. And I'll start, Mr. Cummings, or Chairman Cummings. One of the items listed in here is updating the camera systems in committee. The first question is the camera systems that are mentioned, are those for the main committee room, or are they for like a video production system?
Main committee room.
Okay. Follow-up, what's the issue with the cameras you have now? I just, and I know your staff has most of the answers. You recently had a committee hearing that a fairly prominent person was on, and millions of people across the nation watched Mr. Cohen. In fact, we had the chairman of the Federal Reserve in Financial Services that day, which normally gets a lot of media attention, but you guys sucked the wind out of the room for everybody. I walked into our ante room, and all the staff is watching in pretty good quality all the hearings that were going on with Mr. Cohen. It seemed to work well then. So my question really is, what's the issue?
They're outdated, and they have a tendency to malfunction.
Okay.
So we just want to bring them up to date.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Jordan, have you experienced the same problems the years you've been on?
No, I would just look in the 114th Congress, 2015, 2016. $18,059,682 to run the committee. In the 116th Congress, the proposal is for $19,939,573. I mean, it's like that number back in 2015 was actually less than what the current budget is. So it's already an increase from where it was the final years of the previous administration, but they want even more. I think we can do it. I think we can get by with the cameras were there, as an example. They seem to work fine, as you point out, 2 weeks ago. I'll tell you what didn't work fine 2 weeks ago. Their first big hearing, the first announced, think about this, the first announced witness of the 116th Congress, Michael Cohen, a guy who was going to prison in 2 months for lying to Congress, and when they brought him in front of the committee, what did he do? What did he do? He lied 7 times. We've sent a criminal referral letter to the Justice Department. 2 are absolutely 100% positive we know he did. He said he didn't want to work at the White House, and everyone else said, yes, he did. And he said he didn't seek a pardon. Even his lawyer said he was looking at a pardon. So they need more money for those type of hearings? I don't think so. More money to bring in someone in front of Congress who's already lied to Congress and was brought in front of Congress again and did what? Lied again. So, again, we're not asking to cut anything. We're just asking to hold the line.
I do have a few more questions as well. I'm with you, Mr. Jordan. You've been on the committee for several years. How many, were we at 100% of all the staff slots in the last 4 years?
No.
No.
Not under Chairman Gowdy, no.
Mr. Cummins, your request, will that bring up the request for additional funding for additional staff members? Will that bring it up to full? Will it bring it up to full?
No, but it'll help.
It'll help.
No.
How?
I don't have all of that. I can supply that to you.
Okay.
But let me say this. I think when we talk about truth, let's be honest. Let's be honest. I've heard this untruth, and I usually don't use that word, about the first witness that we brought was Michael Cohen. That's a lie. And I don't use that word lightly. And he knows that. The first witness that we presented was a woman with regard to prescription drugs, a lady named Miss Wortham. He saw her. A lady came in, 22-year-old daughter, died because she couldn't get $333 worth of insulin a month.
I'd like to reclaim.
No. I just
whatever
want to
time.
make sure that's clear.
Yeah.
Then we had another hearing, and then this was our third hearing, the Cohen hearing. So let's be honest now. Let's be truthful.
And I just close with this, and I appreciate what Mr. Butterfield said, but from my recollection, the president did go and ask for 5% cost reductions from all of the cabinet and all the agencies in the government. So I yield back.
Madam Chair, could I clarify something?
Briefly, I want to get
I
to the
said the
gentlelady
first
from Ohio.
announced witness of the 116th Congress was, in fact, Michael Cohen from this committee. And I said the first big hearing. Now, if you want to say that wasn't a big hearing
Well,
2 weeks ago,
we
we
will.
can have that debate. But I said
I
the
think
first big
that's
hearing.
really a diversion from the funding request, if I
just
may.
want to be clear on the
And
record.
I want to
the
be clear, too.
The gentlelady from Ohio is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I thank you both for being here. I just really have some comments as well. Just in the last year, we paid farmers $13 billion because of bad trade policy. We found $13 billion. President wants $8 billion for a wall that we don't need. $1.5 trillion in cuts to the very wealthiest people in this country, and we can't find $1 million to help everyday people to make sure that they can afford their prescriptions. We can't help everyday people determine that they can vote the way that they're supposed to. We can't help people who are dying from opioids. $1.5 million, but we spent $13 billion to pay farmers because of a bad trade policy of the president. $5 to now $8 billion for a wall that we don't need. We spent in the last 8 years millions and millions of dollars. I could just name one silly investigation now. We looked at Benghazi 3 times. I don't remember hearing anybody complain about it. On your side, our side did. So we can find money to do that clearly. We can find money to take care of people, everyday hard-working people, to be sure that they know their government is working for them, that we are trying to be sure that there is no waste, fraud, and abuse, and we know that there is plenty, and to hold accountable the people that we pay. I don't think that's too much to ask, Madam Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Would the gentleman from California like to be heard for 5 minutes?
Just a few questions, Madam Chair. I don't plan on using my entire time. Mr. Chairman, with respect to the budget submittal before us, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to just understand the role of oversight, which I understand does take resources. Does the committee plan on investigating the role the administration played in implementing the family separation policy at the border?
Yes.
Does the committee plan on investigating the role the administration played in the preparation and response to Hurricanes Irma and Maria?
Yes, it's one of my top priorities.
Does the committee plan on investigating the ongoing water crisis in Flint, Michigan, and the administration's failure to address it?
I asked my staff about that last night. Yes, we have not tied that up yet.
Does the committee plan on investigating reports on the Intrepid organization's process for identifying payment from foreign governments and foreign government-controlled entities?
Yes.
Does the committee plan on investigating the White House security clearance process and reports that the president personally intervened to grant clearances to his daughter and son-in-law against the recommendation of
Definitely, but
intelligence?
right now the White House has been stonewalling us on information, but we'll get in there.
Does the committee plan on investigating the possible misuse of government-owned aircraft for personal use by Trump administration officials?
Yes, we've been investigating that for a while.
Does the committee plan on investigating the multiple ethics violations by former EPA Administrator Pruitt?
Yes.
Does the committee plan on investigating allegations that the Department of Homeland Security violated whistleblower protection laws?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Gentleman yields back. We're not having a second round, but the ranking member is asked to be recognized for a couple of additional questions or comments.
Thank you. Just quick comments, and I certainly hope I think we get the gist of what your committee is going to do by basically creating an investigatory environment for the executive branch. And I certainly hope that the committee chair will take into consideration our desires to ensure that processes that maybe the ranking member will bring up in regards to a FISA warrant that was requested during the last administration. I certainly hope your committee will take the time with additional resources to actually investigate those officials too. But my issue is, you mentioned the Cohen hearing. Do you plan on having Mr. Cohen back as part of the increase?
No, I don't.
Okay. We had a 5-hour markup in here where we probably resembled the Oversight Committee a little more than we usually do. And it took about 5 hours that day, but nobody really covered us either. Your cameras were very well viewed. My issue is, I thought, and this is something you might want to go back and work with your staff on, I thought all the cameras in the hearing rooms were covered by a reserve fund under the CAO for renovations and wouldn't come out of your budget anyway. So that may be an issue that you might want to address with your staff.
I'll check with my staff on it, but believe me, I have one of the best chiefs of staff. He's right here.
Yeah, no. I'm a 16.
And if he says there's a problem, there's a problem.
I'm a 16-year staffer.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of respect for staffers.
Yeah, we're very careful with the money, the people's money.
But so are we, and that's why I wanted to at least bring it to his attention, to your attention. You might want to go back with your figures and address that in your request, because that should not count towards your request. And I want to make sure that we also put this into perspective. What you're asking for in an increase in just personnel compensation is about $800,000 the first year. That's 72% of each members of Congress MRA. And what you're asking for the next year is another $900,000, which is another about 81% of an MRA request. I just want to put this into perspective, considering how we members operate our offices before we go forward. With that, thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it.
Gentlemen, may I answer?
Ranking member yields back. Chair recognizes herself.
Yeah, I
for
just
5
I just
minutes.
wanted to say, we have our entire oversight plan that we've submitted last week, and it sets forth a very large set of investigative priorities, ranging from hurricane response efforts to preventing retaliation.
And we will make that a part of our
whistleblowers.
record, Mr.
It's a lot.
We will make that part of the official
Thank you very much.
record. And I would just note that, part of what the committee is dealing with were very substantial decreases in prior Congresses. In the 113th, an 8% decrease, 113th Congress, an almost 14% decrease. And so here you are with a lot to do. And so I recognize that. I respect that you have always supported your chairman's request.
Always.
Even though you might not have agreed with them completely in the past, which has been, I think, the pattern for the Congress. So I will note that this committee and all the others do important work. When you look at the staffing of Congress compared to the entire federal government, we're really not staffed up to take the kind of scrutiny that is required over federal agencies. And we are the first branch of government. We have responsibilities. We need to make sure that not only in our individual offices, but in our committees, that we are equipped to discharge those obligations in an efficient and professional manner. I will note that we have received, not just with this committee request, but with other committees' requests for increases. The appropriations bill has already been passed for this year, and so we are operating within that constraint. So meritorious as many of these requests may be, we're going to have to put on our eye shades and see what can be done for all of the requests that are coming in, as well as the members' representational allowance, and we'll do our very best within the constraints that we have, and we will be doing the markup when we return from the recess. Thank you both very much for being here. And I believe that is the only testimony we have, so we can adjourn this hearing, and we will reconvene after the recess for the actual allocations. We are adjourned.